Hello, welcome to the Red Devils Den podcast, where we talk all things Manchester United. Yes, we are available on multiple platforms now, so listen and follow on your preferred platform. If you watch on YouTube, do give us a like and subscribe as well. But in terms of football, we've got the Burnley talk coming up on the weekend. We'll talk about that now. But in terms of Granada, Josh, what were your thoughts on it?
Professional, good performance. It's kind of, the game was kind of just to and fro in nowhere, basically, especially after Pogba's yellow card. I thought maybe before that it could have been a 3 or 4-0 kind of victory, but I think that yellow card kind of set the tone of what Granada wanted to do, which was be rough and frustrate and maybe get a decision that could bring them back into the game. But yeah, I was obviously really happy that we're in another semi-final. Few players stood out. Maybe Axel was probably my favourite of the night. Professional, saw it out well. Great goal, Cavani, and happy to see Juan back on the pitch. Yeah, just happy.
Yeah, definitely. So, United resurgent, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Josh kind of covered it. There's not really a lot to add to that. It wasn't the most exciting match in the world, particularly in the second half. The referee was as shambolic as the referee was in the first leg, constantly blowing us up for any kind of contact, whereas Granada basically had to stab somebody in order to get the yellow card out. So it was a little bit unfortunate that the standard of refereeing was so poor in a continental competition. But as far as our performance goes, just professional. Nobody made any errors. The entire team kind of just showed up and said, okay, we're going to score first. We're going to make this impossible for Granada, and then we're going to go ahead and just see out the 90 minutes. And that's what you need at this stage of the season, because as we've talked about before, players' fitness is declining. We're the only team in Europe that's played in every midweek all season long. And with the fatigue that's there, with the injuries that we have, you can't expect fluid, dominating performances every 3 days, which is what we've been playing. So I think that just seeing out the result was the big win here, and the 5th semifinal for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Yeah, great stuff. So obviously, I want to ask about Pogba because he was actually the captain. I think I know United resurgence thoughts, so I'll ask Dan. What were your thoughts on him being the captain?
I wouldn't read too much into it personally. I don't think it's like an effort to get him to stay. When you think about it, there's probably 4 potential captains that are on the pitch tonight. You could have given it to Bruno, you could have given it to De Gea. I think Axel was actually captain the side at one point in time. So we know Pogba's got the abilities of a leader. I mean, there's that famous video before the 2018 World Cup final. So we know that he can sort of rally a team, and he's got leadership qualities. So I don't think it's a really big thing personally.
Yeah. Does it put anyone apart from United resurgent be against Pogba being captain?
Look, I just wanted to clarify on that a little bit. My problem isn't necessarily that Paul Pogba got to be captain of United. He's a strong leader. We've seen that with France in the World Cup. So it's not that I don't think Pogba has leadership credentials. It's just that we're talking about a player whose agent has been making noises that he wants to leave, who himself has not denied that he wants to leave. And actually, if you go back to the 2019 preseason, has actively told the media himself that maybe it's time for a change. And has never changed that stance publicly. So it's my opinion that the club should never pander to a player. And if someone wants to leave, I don't care if they're Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, you don't treat them special to try to get them to stay. And so unless Paul Pogba has told Ole Gunnar Solskjaer that I'm going to sign a new contract next month, I don't see the rationale behind making him captain for this fixture. But as Dan said, ultimately, I don't think it's something to read too much into. I think it's just a decision that the manager made, and people who feel like me have to get over it, and people who feel the other way need to realize that doesn't probably amount to a whole lot.
Yeah, obviously, so we're through to the semi-finals. We've got Roma beat Ajax over 2 legs, so they're obviously quite a strong side. could see the return to Old Trafford for Mkhitaryan and Chris Smalling as well. So United, Apollo, how confident are you for the semi?
I mean, I can understand why some people are nervous given our recent semi-final record, but I think the fact it's over 2 legs changes everything. I think in a one-off game, it's relatively easy to have an upset. It's not unheard of. But when you stretch it over to 2 legs, you would like to think that the team with the most quality would eventually come out on top. So I'm really not worried. I think over 2 legs, we should be absolutely fine.
Dan, do you have anything to add? Any thoughts on Roma semi-final?
I did watch Roma last night. Just a handful of clips, just sort of get my head around the way they play. To be honest, and we've got too much for them ultimately. As Apollo just mentioned, 1 leg, yeah, okay, it's very easy to have an upset, but over 2, I'm fairly confident that we've got enough to do. We're probably better quality-wise in every department on the pitch. So, I don't see it being routine at all. It's a semi-final of a European competition. Of course, they're going to put up a fight. They've got Edin Dzeko, who played for City and other clubs as well. But he's their main man. He's 35-year striker. He's their main man, and I think we'll do fairly well to keep them out. To be honest, because we've conceded 11 goals in our last 19 games. I think that's right. Anyway, so we haven't been conceding a lot. So I don't think it'd be comfortable, but I think we're definitely enough to get past them.
Yeah, fair enough. So in terms of, I don't think anyone else will have too much more to add in terms of the semi-final.
On Roma, I would say that people shouldn't underestimate them. They have the 4th best XG in Serie A, the 5th best XGA. They're currently on the league table. It looks like they're going to finish either in the Europa League or the Europa Conference spot. But on the whole, if you look at their quality of play, they're a side that might be a borderline Champions League team in another season. They're not a bad team. Chris Smalling is 50-50 whether or not he's going to be available for this particular match. But as far as the rest of the team goes, there's a lot of quality there. It's a lot of older players, but it's players that we're familiar with. You've got Pedro, Hendrik Mkhitaryan, Edin Dzeko. These are players who've graced the Premier League and excelled in years past. It's just that they're obviously past their best. And with veteran players, the thing is, you never know when they can just turn it on for a big game. And this is a side that's capable of doing that. So United have to be very cautious in our approach to this fixture. Roma are not going to give us the space that Ajax would have to play. This is going to be a cagey, tight game. Roma will set up to defend deep. They have good center backs. And then they will have Edin Dzeko on set pieces, who is an absolute monster. And obviously Harry Maguire can cope with him, but if he isolates Victor Lindelof or our zonal marking fails on a set piece, then there's a very good chance that he'll score. And they've got other good players as well. I was watching some of their match yesterday on the second screen, and they had this young player, I think it's Castafiore or something. I can't remember his name exactly, but he was 18 years old, and the guy looked so full of confidence, and he's fantastically taking on players from the left wing. And there's a lot of quality there. People shouldn't underestimate this. We went out to Sevilla last year. We lost in the FA Cup to Leicester City. We lost in the FA Cup last year to Frank Lampard's Chelsea, which is somewhat disgraceful in hindsight. So just don't underestimate this fixture. United should have enough quality to get through over 2 legs, but it's not going to be easy. This is going to be the kind of thing where if we win 2-1 on aggregate over 2 legs, you have to consider that a good job.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Josh was the only one who didn't speak about the Roma semi-final. I didn't think anyone would have something to add, but United was went on for 2-3 minutes about that. So,
did I get asked something?
Yeah, go on, Josh.
My inset's just been a bit weird. No, nothing really to add on Roma. I did have a look at the XG and expected points last night. It's around 4th, 5th in the league. So, considering we you know, we had a very tough game against Milan over 2 legs, but shouldn't really have conceded a goal. Maybe we should have. Maybe we got lucky in maybe in a couple of circumstances. But it's going to be as tough and as difficult. But we just should. Over 2 legs is why I'm more confident. Obviously, in a one-off game, like Apollo said, you know, qualities can show, and veteran players, like Resurgence said, can come to the fro. But I'm confident over 2 legs, but definitely not thinking it's a given after what's happened over the last couple of years with semi-finals. This is certainly not a given. We're in a strong position in the league, so we can rotate. We couldn't really ask for better circumstances going into the semi-finals, really. Our best, most important players are suspension free. So here we go.
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, we talked about the semi-final, obviously overall the Granada game, but in terms of, like, you know, man of the match, what are you guys thinking? Are we thinking, well, Pogba played 45 minutes, so probably not him. Cavani, what do you think? You know,
Me personally, I would go for Axel Tuanzebe, just because he has not played for a long time, and he comes back and he seemed fresh. He seemed very fit. He made the most blocks last night. In the absence of Maguire in the air, he was pretty good. Really happy for him. I really like Axel, so I would like to see him succeed at the club. Maybe next season, if he steps up into the 3rd centre-back role, which Bailly currently operates, or has a good pre-season, who knows? I think we've spoken about this before. If there's going to be one position prioritised, it looks like it would be a striker or right winger, or maybe even a defensive midfielder now, over a centre-back, because of the form that we've shown defensively over the last couple of months. So we needed a performance like that from Axel. I know it is only Granada, but hopefully it's more from him to come.
I thought Axel was fantastic, but I have to say I completely disagree with your characterization that a center back is less of a priority now. I think all the media reports are pretty consistent from the reliable sources that United will sign a center back this summer. We're looking for a partner for Harry Maguire. And so for next season, as I see it, the most likely scenario is Maguire and our new center back as the first choice, then Victor Lindelof as the 3rd center back, and Axel will remain the 4th center back at the club, for better or for worse. I realize that limits his minutes probably beyond what's justified, but I think at this point, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has, with Axel's injuries and a couple of bad performances here and there, gotten to the point where he no longer considers him to be someone who's going to actively challenge Victor Lindelof for that position. He's kind of fallen into the Romero trap in that sense, where he's just good enough to be a squad player, but not quite good enough to challenge the ones the manager views as the first choice. So I expect us to sign a center back this summer, and the reports around Varane, Pau Torres, Jules Koundé, whoever it is, I fully expect a center back to be one of our chief pieces of business. Back to the main question about man of the match. For me, it's Edinson Cavani. I thought he was fantastic. He's displayed, again, why we need a classic number 9 at the club next season, whether that's Cavani or somebody else.
Yeah, fair enough. On to Anzeby, I do think he can be long-term, you know, centre-back to partner Maguire. I don't think he will be, because, as you say, the reports say that we're looking for a centre-back to partner Harry Maguire from the transfer market, not from our own team. But I think Swansby should go on loan, because he was so good at Villa, and then he came back. He was really good for a while, playing in the Europa League, played a few Premier League games. I think I said this on a previous podcast, but then he got injured in the warm-up against Liverpool, and then ever since, you just haven't really seen the same Axel Swansby. We haven't really seen him get many minutes at all. So I still do think he can be that player. I think he'd be a top player, and he's got all the sort of technical and physical attributes as well to partner Harry Maguire, because he's fast. He's good on the ball, which Ollie obviously wants. He's okay in the air. He's good positionally. I just think he's a really talented player, and long term, I think he can fill that role. But
Could I just
I don't
respond
know.
to Resurgent there,
Go on.
if that's all right? Just because, you know, there's a lot more reports from reliable people saying we've not got a lot of money to spend. So if we're going to have Sancho and we're going to look for a striker and we're going to look for a midfielder, where's the money coming from? You know, to sign a centre back, it's we might need a backup goalkeeper too if De Gea goes. We might need a backup right back to challenge Alan Wan-Bissaka. I don't see a magic money tree, and I definitely don't see Glazers going into the pockets anytime soon. So there will be a position which he's going to prioritise over another at some point in the summer. I know we've got Murtaugh and Fletcher there now, but I'm still not too trustworthy of deals to be done because Ed Woodward's signing the checks and the Glazers aren't providing the paper.
I agree with you that the finances are going to be limited, but from what I can tell from the reporting, I would say this position that misses out is going to be defensive midfielder in the summer. We haven't been linked to the position broadly. We've just been linked with Declan Rice by one credible report. And even on that, the people close to West Ham are strongly suggesting that they would ask for prohibitive money, close to £100 million, which even if you take Jesse Lingard as a part weight at 30 million, we're not going to pay 70 million plus Lingard for Declan Rice. And we haven't been linked to any other defensive midfielders by credible sources. So what I would suggest is most likely is probably either a striker or a winger as the big signing. So whether that's Sancho, Haaland, Kane, somebody like that. And then you get a center back for under 50 million. Varane, if he's available, because he has 1 year on his contract. Pau Torres, Jules Koundé, Nikola Milenkovic, Sven Botman. There's a lot of names out there. And then probably 2 really cheap signings, a backup goalkeeper for less than £5 million, and maybe Kieran Trippier for 10 or 12 million as a right back. So I don't think that we're going to be spending huge money on 3 or 4 positions. It's just that from what I can tell from the reporting, and I know a lot of United fans will disagree with this, but it does seem as though the club are prioritizing a center back and an attacker over a defensive midfielder.
Yeah, fair enough.
You disagree with that?
It's a difficult decision, I think, because we need all of those positions. What I would argue is Victor Lindelof is a better center back or closer to a title-winning center back than Scott McTominay and Nemanja Matic are to a title-winning defensive midfielder.
Yeah.
So I would rather sign a defensive midfielder. I think I've said center back previously, but over the last couple of weeks, my mind's kind of changed on that, despite with the good form of Victor Lindelof. So I would go for a defensive midfielder. It doesn't even have to be Declan Rice. I love Soumare at Lille. I think he's going to be absolutely world class, and Leicester have been linked with him as a replacement for Ndidi, or even to supplement Ndidi. And that's the kind of signing that, like Fofana now, we're going to look back on in a year and say, why didn't we do that? And so I think there's a lot of options out there at defensive midfielder at every price bracket that the club could consider, but it doesn't seem like that's what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with what Sergio said about the club not actually actively looking for a defensive midfielder. It literally has been Declan Rice, and even that seems like a very opportunistic signing. I mean, we know that Ollie's he's admired him for some time, but because of obviously the resurgence of Jesse Lingard and how well he's been doing, it's sort of, you know, an idea that sparked in Ollie's head, saying, "Oh, could we use Jesse Lingard as a make way for Declan Rice?" I see it as a complete opportunistic signing, and I don't think it's a priority at all.
United Apollo, what do you think? Do you think priority should be centre back or defensive midfielder?
Like the others have said, I think it should be the defensive midfielder, but I think it is the centre back. So I think the club's probably got this one wrong, and we just have to hope we can cope with that fact next season. But obviously, there's still time for things to change. We could potentially, I don't think it's impossible to make a deal involving Lingard for Rice, but I don't think it's going to be easy. And I do agree that's probably the only way we get a defensive midfielder this summer, if we can agree a deal for Rice.
Yeah.
It probably depends on if West Ham get Champions League, if other clubs who we could be interested in their midfielders, if they get Europe, and that will dictate kind of what price we pay for centre backs and defensive midfielders. Probably next month we'll probably definitely know what kind of positions we're looking for, because there'll be more reports and more leaks. But I just don't want it to be as stressful as last summer.
I think looking at the reports, we have a pretty good idea of what the club are targeting. It's kind of, if you look back to Ollie's first summer at the club, I think that's the blueprint for this summer, where we spent big money on Harry Maguire, a good amount of money on Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and then went for a cheap signing in Dan James. I'm expecting something similar, with the middle signing being a center back, the cheap signing being a backup right back, and potentially a goalkeeper, but that could even be done on a free transfer, so I'm not too worried about a backup goalkeeper. I think the real question is that expensive signing. We've been linked with Haaland and Kane and other strikers extensively, but then at the same time, we've also been linked with a move for Jadon Sancho if the price is right. And I don't see us having the money to do both unless there's a cheap release clause for a certain Portuguese striker who plays for Eintracht Frankfurt and is the second top scorer in the Bundesliga this season. But unless we're going for something really cheap, or unless we find something like that, it does seem like it's going to be either Kane or either a striker or Sancho. And it's unclear which one of those the club are going to go for. But I think the other positions are pretty set in stone at this point.
I think the reason that we don't yet know that of which category it's in is because it's conditional based. If we get Cavani to stay for another year, we're not going to go and spend 120 million on a striker. We're still waiting to find out a couple of pieces of information to really dictate who are we going for.
But if you go back 2 months on the reporting, you'll see that even when everyone was reporting that Edinson Cavani's definitely staying, the club were still heavily linked with the striker. And at the same time, one of the reasons Cavani is said to be considering leaving is the club are looking at a striker and his minutes could be curtailed next season. So it's not set in stone, I think, that if Cavani stays, we don't go for a striker. Although that's how I would play it, similar to the defensive midfielder situation. I think if you get Edinson Cavani to stay, you go with Jadon Sancho. If you can't, then you have to go for a striker. That's how I'd look at it, but it doesn't appear as though that's definitely how the club are looking at it. So we just don't know, I think, at this point what the big signing will be. But we have holes at both positions. So like I said, with defensive midfielder and center back, we need both eventually. It's just a question of what comes now, what comes later. And I think ultimately that if we add one more player who can have the offensive output of a Bruno Fernandes or a Marcus Rashford, then the club will be better placed for a title challenge next season, no matter which position it's in.
And I'm just wondering what everyone's thoughts are, because sometimes Fabrizio will tweet and he leaves, I don't know if it's a hint or if he's just saying it, where he says Manchester United had the money there last year to sign Jadon Sancho, but Dortmund wanted more. I'm wondering if we've still got that money and then have a separate budget for another big signing. And
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
think that is what he's suggesting. I think that's exactly what he's suggesting. At the end of last summer, like after deadline day, when we didn't get Jadon Sancho, Fab said they've saved 100 million. So the money for Pellistri and Ahmad obviously came out of something else. But as far as Fabrizio's information goes, is that we did save the 100 million pounds, and we were ready to pay 100 million pounds. But it was obviously, as time's gone on, information has come out, it was Dortmund who changed the stance, and I really do hope that money is still there, and it's still for Jadon Sancho. To be honest, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, I know that we've obviously signed Pellistri and Ahmad, but they're not ready to hold down the right wing spot, as we know. They're far too young and inexperienced. But I've lost my train of thought now. What was I going with?
I think you guys both have a point, but what I would say is my expectation, at least, is that the club don't have a huge pot for this summer after the losses during the season, from not having fans in the stadium and from having the mega shop closed and everything. So I think there's a very good chance that the Jadon Sancho money from last summer is the bulk of our budget this summer. And the result of that would probably be that budget goes towards hopefully Sancho. And then the rest of the money is small amount, 50 million, something like that. And then with player sales, we supplement it and use it to cover the other positions. I don't think there's one mega pot from last season of £100 million and then another 100 million from this season. I think more likely there's probably 80, 90 left over from last season, and then maybe 30 to 50 for this season. And our net spend ends up somewhere in that lower 100 million plus range. Or maybe not net spend, but our kind of outlay on players ends up in that range.
One thing that does sort of give me a small piece of hope is that Ollie and obviously this board don't mind going back in for players that they've been in before. We saw that with Bruno Fernandes when we tried to get him in the summer. We then ended up getting in January. So obviously Ollie spends all this time looking at their character, the way they play, how they're going to fit into the dressing room. So obviously when he has his targets, he gets his targets, even if it takes 2 windows. So obviously we could very well be in for Jadon Sancho this summer, but obviously it remains to be seen.
Now that you say we go back for our targets, it kind of brings me to what I think is the crux of the decision between a striker and a right winger this summer. I don't think it's Cavani. I think the key player is Mason Greenwood. I think what's going to happen is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will sit down at the end of the season and decide, because I think he sees Mason Greenwood as a starter at this point. I don't think he sees him as a squad player. He sees him as almost a year or 2 behind Marcus Rashford, right? That's kind of how he sees his importance to the team. And I think what's going to happen is Ollie will have to decide, can Mason Greenwood lead the line next season? And if Mason can't lead the line, then we have to go for a striker and Mason could stay on the wing. Or if he feels that if Ollie feels that Mason is ready to lead the line, then you can go for a winger. But I think that's the key decision that's going to guide the big signing in the summer. It's going to be whether or not Mason Greenwood is ready to be that number 9. We've seen increased signs of it with the headed goal recently. That's things that he hasn't been doing before. He's been making better runs, but he's still a work in progress as a number 9. And while he's getting increased minutes there, it's an open question whether or not Ollie feels he can lead the line against Premier League centre backs.
At least
Ollie definitely. Sorry, go on, Apollo.
At least we are getting a decent amount of sample size to see that. So then at the end of the season, he'll have had quite a few chances at striker. So we can say, we've got all this evidence, let's look at what it shows. Whereas otherwise, if he wasn't getting chances there, it would be almost a guess and hoping of whatever role you think is the best. But we should have quite a bit of evidence by the end of the season for one way or the other.
100%. And I think Ollie definitely, as Resurgent said, sees him as a starter. But it hurt him at the beginning of the season when Mason needed to be protected and probably not play a few games, but he had to play him because we needed him. So it probably hurt Ollie because we didn't have a Sancho where we had to throw Mason into games, even though he probably needed a few weeks off after the stuff that happened away with England. Just like now he needs to give Rashford time off, but he can't because Martial's now injured. So, yeah, we definitely, attack has to be a priority. Whether it's Sancho, well, for me, Sancho is a non-starter. He has to be bought, but probably another one. And that's my point.
So, Dan, what do you think should be like the number 1 priority going into the summer?
Jadon Sancho.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. I mean, he's 20 years old. Dortmund are about to not qualify for the Champions League. They've lost a fucking shitload of money. It's so obvious. I mean, we needed him a year ago. It's so obvious. He's an elite creator. He's so good. You've seen Haaland without Sancho in the last 6 or 7 games. I don't think he hasn't scored. It makes so much sense. I wanted the guy for about 18 months. He's my priority. I would go out and I would be talking to Dortmund now. And plus, if you land Sancho, Darren Fletcher and John Murtagh, you become the favourite people at the club, for the entire summer.
He's become our white whale kind of Moby Dick, basically, where the person who finally catches him is going to be kind of worshipped in the fan base for some time.
Yeah, this is it. It could be a massive statement. They could make themselves fan favourites for the entire summer.
I was looking on Transfermarkt yesterday, And the thing that stood out to me was people say Jadon Sancho had a bad start to the season. His mind was focused on a move. He's had a down year. And even among all that, he has 28 goal contributions in 31 matches this season across all competitions, which is absolutely absurd. They're the kind of numbers that are kind of Bruno Fernandes-esque. And there's question marks whether we'll go for him or not. I can understand if Cavani leaves and Mason's not ready that we need a striker, but I think that can be handled cheaper. For me, and same with center back, I think that can be handled cheaper. For me, the place where you put the bulk of your money is Jadon Sancho, and then everything else can be built around that.
He's 20 years old. You know, he's got 12 years at the top level. You know, he could cement the right wing for ages. We haven't had a proper right winger. I can't even remember. Maybe Tony Valencia for a bit, but not really. Angel Di Maria, not really. You know, he can cement that spot for so long, and he's got a good personality. We know that he gets on with Marcus Rashford from his time with England. You see all the nice little gifts and them bumping fists and things like that. So yeah, just come and get him. I mean, what was his goal contributions last year? 40, didn't he have 20 goals and
20 goals, 20 assists? Yeah,
it's insane.
People are holding it against him that Timo Werner and Kai Havertz have failed to live up to expectations so far in the Premier League. And they're saying, oh, there's a Bundesliga tax. And there is to some extent, you know, they have more open space behind defenses, but Jadon Sancho is not Timo Werner. He doesn't rely on his pace as much. If you ask anyone who watched Leipzig last season, I know Apollo and I did a lot after Project Restart, and you could see that Werner is so heavily relying on his pace to get in behind defenders. And then that's what his game is built upon. With Jadon Sancho, he brings creativity into the mix. He's got a much better skill set than Timo Werner does, and it was obvious in the Bundesliga. There have been plenty of players who've come in from the Bundesliga and have done well as well. People like to focus on the flops. You look at Roberto Firmino. He was the best false nine in the world or best defensive striker or whatever the Liverpool. Whatever term the Liverpool fans have come up with to defend him next. But regardless of whether he's the best or not, he was still quite decent for them as they won the league. You look at Christian Pulisic, injuries have hampered him a little bit, but he also is a right winger who came from Dortmund. And he has been absolutely fantastic for Chelsea. You look at his goal returns last season, and I'm not just saying this because I'm an American, but he's been one of the best wingers around. And so there have been plenty of good players from the Bundesliga, and people need to focus on that instead of looking at just the flops, who are basically partly the result of Frank Lampard's mismanagement and partly the result of faulty scouting, where people had expectations that there's going to be this all-round player who's going to arrive, when in reality, people who've been watching him in the Bundesliga know he's a streaky finisher. They know he's heavily reliant on his pace, and they know he's heavily reliant on space and behind. So it's kind of like saying that, you know, Jesse Lingard and Bruno Fernandes both played number 10 for Manchester United, so they're the same player. It's just not the case. You look at their skill set. Bruno is good at finding tight room in tight spaces. Lingard needs space in behind to play. That's kind of the same situation with Sancho and Werner.
And they need time. They're in a corona world, so Werner and Havertz needed time, and now they've got a very good coach in Tuchel. So they're just gonna. Next season is when you can judge for sure. I mean, Havertz was sensational against Crystal Palace, so he's going to go from strength to strength probably. And this is Chelsea podcast.
Yeah, just as Jadon Sancho as well, before we sort of move on. I don't even think, you know, we weren't even expecting to go on to transfers, but just on Jadon Sancho, United research was talking about his goal contributions and stuff. This season, those numbers have been so amazing. He wasn't even on good form for the first sort of half of the season. You were saying, "Oh, should we go for Jadon Sancho? He's not even playing well." And now look at him, like, you know, his goal contribution is so good. And Dortmund,
just one player well, didn't they?
And Dortmund aren't even doing that well either as a whole. But yeah,
I have to say, I think the FA should be sponsoring some of these signings for us. If you look at it, right, next season, if we got all of our signings that we want, which we won't, but hypothetically, just pretend we do for a minute, our 11 could be Dean Henderson, Wan-Bissaka. It could have Maguire, Shaw, Declan Rice, Sancho, Greenwood, Rashford in the same team. I think the FA should be sponsoring this. We're basically the England 11 at that point, and Gareth Southgate can just move to Manchester and make his job a lot easier. So ultimately, I think there's a lot of value in that, and it'd just be great to see a nice, strong English core, similar to how we had when we won the Champions League twice.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously talked about Granada transfers. Now it's time for Burnley talk on Sunday. Okay. So on to the Burnley talk. Obviously that's coming up on Sunday. United resurgent. What do you think about it? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so just before we go ahead and talk about the match itself, I want to go ahead and touch on the injury concerns for both sides so people know who's playing for us, who's available for them. It looks like Robbie Brady and Ashley Barnes have been ruled out, and with Barnes being a constant menace for us, that's good news from our side. Kevin Long is unlikely to make it, and then Dwight McNeil and Nick Pope are 50-50 whether or not they'll be available to play. So that's the Burnley team news. With United, Eric Bailly is probably going to be available, but he has been out with COVID for some time, so it's not guaranteed yet. Marcus Rashford, again, probably available, at least on the bench, but we don't know if he's going to be fit to start. He's still carrying a knock. And then the two that are definitely out are Phil Jones and Anthony Martial. All of that data is per premierinjuries.com. As far as the match itself goes, I would say that this is so Samuel Luckers tweeted that this is if we win, this would be 5 league wins in a row for the first time since January 2019, when Ollie was still a caretaker. And I think that says everything, that we've become increasingly consistent in the league over the last couple of months or so. And that's starting to pay off. And the teams like Burnley just don't scare me anymore. I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed win for us, because I look at the way that Burnley play, setting up with a low block, being good at set pieces, and it's exactly the kind of team that causes us problems. But Burnley have one of the worst expected goals conceded in the last 3 matches in the Premier League. And ultimately, the form that they're in, it does feel like we should be able to get the win as long as nobody does anything stupid, especially on a set piece.
Yeah, I'm just glad Maguire is back for this one, because obviously suspended in the previous one, and I think we had a couple of problems with set pieces against Granada as well. But against Burnley, it's a whole different ball game, because pretty much every player is, certainly the strikers are like 6'2" at least. So
I think a lot of us have said that Granada were the Spanish Burnley, so we've really had a warm up against the knockoff, and now we get to play against the real thing. So,
I don't know.
there's not better preparation than this for Burnley.
At least Granada sort of blew their load in the first 10 minutes and had a go, and then did
that. So, Josh, thoughts on the game? What do you think about Burnley versus Manchester United?
Big fan of Sean Dyche. Really like Sean Dyche. Listen to a really good podcast with him in. And a lot of what he does at Burnley relates to real life, like what you can do with people in businesses. So I really like Sean Dyche. Good traditional English manager, which is fun. He is honest, and the only disappointing thing is that he was a Liverpool fan when he was younger. Yeah, Maguire's back. He's only 1 yellow away, though, from a 2-game suspension. So hopefully no bookings there. I'm sick of going into games hoping we don't get booked. It's not good. So I'm going to put 50 quid on him to get booked. Yeah, so I think we're in a very good position to win this. We're in a confident mood. We've got the opportunity there to win 5 games in a row in the league for the first time since January 2019, which is fantastic. As Resurgent said, these kind of games don't scare us anymore, which is a really good point of view, because they don't. So I'm really happy and excited for the game. Hopefully we rest Rashford again and he comes off the bench maybe just to keep ticking over. I think we've got the possibility to do that, because we're 7 points clear of second place, and Leicester and Chelsea both playing the cup this weekend. So it's this is probably the weekend now where we see if we do finish second or not. Even though we are dreaming of higher ceilings secretly, It's going to be a good game. Go strong. We've got a week off after Leeds. Maguire doesn't get booked. 3 goals, 3 points, clean sheet. That's the ideal.
I think one of the things that Josh brought up that a lot of people don't understand is that Burnley play the way they do, partly because Sean Dyche is doing such a fantastic job with them that he has to do that to keep them in the Premier League. If you look at it, Burnley's squad cost £85 million, the entire team. So Paul Pogba cost more than the entire Burnley squad. And that's the 3rd cheapest side in the division after West Brom and Fulham. And it's not much more expensive than Fulham. So he is working on absolute shoestring and has been for years now. And he runs that club from top down, like Sir Alex Ferguson had at United. He runs the scouts, he runs the physios. He's on top of everything. He's an old-fashioned English manager in that sense. And people get offended by the way Burnley play because it's not fashionable to play a lot of crosses, 2 strong strikers up front, 4-4-2. But you have to realize that given what Sean Dyche is working with, if he doesn't play that way, they're going to end up getting relegated long, long ago. And for me, at least personally, I like having at least 1 or 2 sides that play that way in the Premier League because it gives you tactical variety. Every game isn't the same. When I watch a lot of games in the Bundesliga, I see attacking football from every team, yes, but then you look at the spaces left in behind by, let's say, Schalke, who are absolutely abysmal this season. And you just realize that it gets boring after some time just watching the same big teams deal with the same challenge over and over again. Burnley provides something different. I think that they provide a valuable service to the Premier League in that sense. And I for one, am really happy that they're staying up. And I hope with the new ownership that they have, they're able to build upon this project with Sean Dyche, because I think he's a fantastic manager.
Just to elaborate there on Resurgent about the staying up thing, I feel like they do need just one more win just to calm things down. And I really don't want that to be at Old Trafford. We've had it happen to us before, with Sunderland and a couple of other teams towards this time of the season. So we have to be on it. They've had a couple of pretty bad defeats lately. So hopefully, that we are the last one of that, and then they can go and win a couple of games. Sean Dyche that's not his philosophy. His philosophy is playing to players' strengths. He might want to play out from the back. You never know, but he's not going to do it on his budget. He can't get the players in to change anything dramatically. He plays to every single player's strengths. He plays to the human strengths to get that collectiveness. And yeah, he's a fantastic manager. He is. A few people would want him as the England manager. Probably not right for this group, but yeah.
I mean, as Josh said, they're definitely not completely safe from relegation. I mean, they're only 7 points away from the drop zone, and there's still quite a few games to go. So Burnley could really be up for this. I think it's got massive potential to be a banana skin. I mean, I think that does calm me down a bit. It's because, like say, last season when we were doing really well in the big games and we're losing stupid points. Again, obviously we have done this season, but not so much. We have sort of cut that out now, and we are sort of comfortably winning these types of games. But then again, from the results that we had last season, it's got massive potential to be a potential banana skin. And we all know, I think playing Burnley is especially, I don't know, because remember the game when we lost 2-0 to Burnley? I think the game before we got Bruno in. We as a sort of team was in a really bad way. I mean, I know we're nothing like that anymore, but probably because of that time playing Burnley, I always really hate it. Probably because that much, especially. I mean, Burnley.
Can you do it on a windy night at Stoke? Basically, the new challenge of being in the Premier League. I remember when Pep Guardiola first arrived, he basically said, "I'm looking forward to playing the Big Sam." And then Sam left soon after for the England job, and we all know how that went. But ultimately, it's one of those unique challenges of the Premier League that people look forward to.
Yeah.
And as much as it can be frustrating for us, especially as a team that's weak at defending set pieces, it's just important to remember that not every club has the resources we do, and we can't expect them all to try to play beautiful football all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we know exactly how the game's going to be. It's going to be a very tough physical game. But as Josh mentioned, he's just really playing to the strength that he's got on not a lot of money at all. I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for Sean Dyche. I think he was fantastic on the. He was on the Peter Crouch pod, and he was mentioning all the sort of sacrifices the players do if they do something stupid in training and they have to go sit in the river down the street or something. I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's brilliant. His gravelly voice is good fun as well, isn't it? So I mean, look, they've won 2 of their last 10, I think, and this is the exact sort of result that Burnley can pull off sometimes. It's happened before. I don't think it's cut and dry that we win this weekend. I think it's going to be really tough. And I only think if we do win, I only think we'll nick a goal, maybe 2.
Yeah. I was going to say, in terms of Ollie's record against Burnley, he has 2 wins, a loss and a draw so far, as Manchester United manager. So the record against Burnley isn't exactly that good. But as Dan was saying, they've only won 2 in the last 10 or whatever. So, they're not on good form, but it does sort of go against Ollie's record against Burnley. But, as you're saying, I think with the likes of Bruno Fernandes, etc., it's going to be a lot easier for us to beat them. But yeah, I think United Apollo is the only one who hasn't given his thoughts on Burnley, so go ahead.
I think it's a game that has the potential to be an upset if we don't approach it properly, but I'm confident that we will. I really want Rashford to be given a rest. I think we should do the same thing as we did yesterday, where we have him on the bench and basically say, you're not coming on unless there's a real emergency situation and we really need you. And then he gets the game off and then gets a full week ahead of the Leeds game. Is it next weekend?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is a game we can afford to give him another rest. And you could play Pogba left wing, for instance, to try and cope with that. And I think we have enough of our squad fit that we can afford to give Rashford a bit more of a rest.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't play Rashford in this one either, especially because it's Burnley. Of all the teams in the Premier League, you don't want his ankle playing against them. But yeah, we've talked about Burnley in general enough. So in terms of the starting 11, unless there's anything else anyone wants to talk about, we'll move on to that.
I don't know if we could talk about this in the starting 11, but there is, as Apollo just said about not being caught off guard. So in this kind of game, do you start McTominay and Fred to keep you honest? We've seen in other games where we've been caught off guard when we haven't started them and we've been outworked because they kind of set the tone. In my personal 11, I haven't started them, so I don't know if any of you guys, I haven't started them together, but I don't know if any of you guys are thinking any different.
Sorry, before we go on to that, I just think pretty much everyone will probably agree with this, but do we go with Dean Henderson, Wan-Bissaka, Lindelof, Maguire, Luke Shaw, first choice back 5, everyone on board?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that makes it easy. Now we're on to the midfield pivot.
So I'll go first. I've personally gone for McTominay and Pogba as our pivot. McTominay had the midweek off. Pogba better at getting the ball through to Bruno through the lines. He played fantastic at Turf Moor. I thought Pogba played was brilliant. I can't remember which goal it was for, but he just shoved about 2-3 Burnley players off him. So
he got booked for him.
Yeah, well, he got booked for that last night. But yeah, I've gone for McTominay and Pogba with Fred having the night off, having the afternoon off. I think it's afternoon game. Is it 4:00? Yeah. So I've gone for Fred having the night off, obviously with Bruno just ahead of them.
I think one position is directly related to the choice of who we pick in the pivot. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. So if we're resting Rashford and you're playing Pogba in the pivot, who plays left wing?
So I've got Dan James as my winger, but I've also kind of been thinking about maybe Donny van der Beek in the kind of Pogba free role that he's been playing lately. But I'm not too sure. I've gone for Dan James.
Did you notice yesterday, for the very first time, Ollie tried Bruno as the wide creator during the game.
Yes,
Put
I did,
Donny
yeah.
in the middle. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
never seen that before. That was an interesting
No.
experiment.
And I thought he would be on the right because he played on the right a few times for Sporting. I never and Portugal, but I've never seen him on the left. But Pogba was coming more inside, and then when Donny came on, he was fully on the left wing. So yeah, it was very interesting that.
I think it goes back to the idea of, we've all discussed many times, that to get the best out of Donny, you need a wide creator. And I think them trying, Ollie trying Bruno there is a real example of, he knows that. He's trying to find a solution until we can get one.
That's a really good point, actually. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's probably Donny's best cameo, because when he's come on before, he hasn't really affected much.
I mean, he scored against Palace, even though we lost.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But as in, when Juan came on, Donny just seemed so confident last night. He was passing forward nearly every time. And he had two wide creators there. He had Bruno and Juan.
The thing that makes me really sad whenever I watch Donny van de Beek play is you can see, just if you watch him, he's always pushing forward into the space between a center back and that fullback on that side. And he's looking for somebody to just either play it over the top, play it through the middle, however you can do it, just get the ball to him, and then he can try to do something in the box from there. And our players are not used to players making that kind of run, and nobody looks for him. It's incredibly sad to see, because you're like, oh, there's Donny making a good run. Nobody does anything. Oh, there he is on the right. Nothing happens again. It's incredibly frustrating to watch. And I think that's why a wide creator is so urgently needed. We're so used to playing the ball to Bruno Fernandes and asking him, okay, now you find somebody or take the shot. Instead, we need to be able to find Donny van de Beek inside the box and say, okay, we're going to be the one creating the chances here, whether that's Fred or Fred or Pogba or whoever it is. So I would just love to see Donny van de Beek get more minutes in general, although I don't think this is the match for him to start. I've actually gone with the McTominay and Fred pivot, and my reason for that is I want the defensive solidity of that partnership to continue. I don't trust, it's not that Paul Pogba wouldn't provide defensive cover. He doesn't as much, and with Burnley that shouldn't be a big issue, but for me, I would play Pogba off the left, so I've gone with McTominay and Fred, and then Greenwood, Bruno, and Pogba, and then Cavani up front.
Exactly the same.
Yeah,
exactly
rather than just repeating it, I've done the same thing as well.
Yeah, that's what I would do as well.
I mean, Fred gives you a more physical presence in the middle as well, and we both know that they're workhorses and they'll work all day for the team anyway. So I really like Pogba off the left. I think he's been able to really affect the game in the last couple of times he's played. Played on the left against Spurs? Am I right? Yeah, I think he was excellent in that game, and obviously he did quite well last night until he unfortunately had to come off. What I will say though on Donny is obviously I think we've mentioned on the podcast before about him being a sort of different number 10 to Bruno, and the team that sort of have to adapt sort of his style of play. I think the getting a proper pre-season in will will boost that no end. We can sort of sit and talk. When Bruno's in the 10, this is how we play. When Donny's in the 10, this is how we play, and it's just going to take time. And I think we've mentioned it a few times that you can't rush into these type of things, and when people call for him to start, perhaps it's not the right time for him to start. The players around him are not used to that type of player yet. But give it a proper pre-season. You never know. And obviously next season with the fixtures are not going to be probably anywhere near as congested as they are now. So we might get 4 or 5 days between games like we used to, and then we might get a chance to work on tactics and things like that. So I think next year is going to be, we're going to see a bit more of Donny. We're going to see a bit more of Donny being effective as well, purely down to those things.
The beautiful part about playing with Fred behind Pogba, as a lot of us have said, I think, is that Fred gives Pogba that confidence that he can go forward, and he knows someone is behind him to mop up in case he gets bypassed on the press, in case something happens. He knows he doesn't have that defensive responsibility. It frees him to go play further up the pitch. And I think that's why we've been seeing better performances from him lately. It's that he's not been playing in that midfield pivot. In a 4-3-3, it can work at Juventus. He was playing on the left side of a midfield 3. But at United, a lot of the time, Ollie and Jose Mourinho asked Pogba to go play with either Matic next to him or McTominay next to him. And that doesn't set him up to do his best. He's not someone who's great at defending. Yeah, he's a big guy and he can kind of put in a shift in the air and he'll try his best to track back when he's motivated. But the big thing with Pogba is he is someone who focuses on creating chances and he needs to be free to that defensive responsibility, and Fred lets us do that. And so for me, there's no question that Fred has to be starting. It's not like we have to rest him with a big game in midweek.
Totally agreed. Pogba does his best work in the final third, and he always does. I think I remember an interview on Sky Sports a couple of years ago when someone asked him where his best position is, and I think even he said it was the sort of left of the midfield three. But my favourite position in which I've seen him, probably in his whole time at United, is off the left. I think he's the most effective. I think he looks happiest. I think he looks more motivated. He was well up for it last night, and we've not seen him like that for a long time. He undoubtedly does his best work in the final third, and I do really like him off the left. Obviously, that's not going to be a permanent thing because Rashford's far too important. He gets far too many goal contributions for us. But I really like Pogba off the left, and I don't think the midfield pivot is his best position. And I don't even think he's particularly great in the 10 either. So Pogba is a winger. You know what I mean? Who knew?
I do think there's a case for him in the pivot, though, as Josh was saying, next to McTominay, because if you're playing Burnley, you obviously need a physical midfield pivot, and obviously McTominay and Pogba gives you that. You get the energy with McTominay as well, and if they're going to sit back, then you need someone to sort of dictate the play, someone to sort of progress the ball forward consistently. I don't really think McFred is very good against a low block, so I think that might be a problem. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, that was my thinking. Just because Pogba's so good at passing it through the lines, and his performance at Turf Moor, probably in a tougher stadium than Old Trafford in terms of playing in the pivot, especially away at Turf Moor, he was brilliant. So left of that pivot with McTominay on the right, Dan James or Donny maybe on the left, probably Dan James. That would be my ideal.
My only problem with that is I don't want to be outworked in the middle. McTominay and Fred will run all day for you. I'm not saying Pogba's lazy, but
we didn't get outworked at Turf Moor. We did get outworked at Turf Moor.
I think it's
fair enough. Fair enough.
I would just say that one of the things that I think is a massive shame is a lot of people tend to look at defensive number 8s and just think of them as defensive midfielders when they're not. And I'll give you 2 examples at United. Fred is one of them, but Ander Herrera is another one. People look back on Ander Herrera and think he's some kind of hatchet man because that's how Jose Mourinho deployed him towards the end during his time at the club. But it's not true. Ander Herrera was very capable of scoring goals, passing through the lines. He wasn't a number 10 by any means, but he was capable of getting forward and contributing. And I think with Fred, to a lesser extent, a similar thing is taking place where people think of McFred, defensive solidity. Fred just runs around a lot and presses people. And yes, he does, and that's a big part of his game. But if you look at his progressive passing numbers, they're not bad at all. Fred does he doesn't do a good job breaking through that final line of defense. But in terms of linking play from defense to kind of that 3 behind the striker, he does a fantastic job at that. He helps us get the ball forward. And I think if you're playing with Pogba wide and Bruno Fernandes at number 10, with Pogba at that left spot in the pivot, he can do a fantastic job of getting the ball to those people in positions where they can do the most damage.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that case. And I wouldn't be opposed to that because the thing with Fred, he takes the ball off the opposition and gives it to our better players. It's when he starts trying to get involved in the shooting and the other stuff that annoys me. But for sure, I would be happy with McTominay and Fred. I want to see Dan James off the left as well.
Fred gets goals, mate. We've seen it at the weekend. Fred gets goals, mate.
I'm curious to see what Apollo thinks about playing Dan James against Burnley.
That was my hesitation of why, when Josh first said the team, I asked, what are you going to do about left wing if you're not playing Pogba there? I don't think this is the right team for him. While I think he's definitely come on in terms of his technique in close spaces compared to, say, a year ago, I still don't think you actively want to play him in this game when you have another option. Maybe I don't know, if he continues the progress he's made in the past year again, then maybe next year he might be a genuine option in these things. But I think while you have other choices, then you probably want to not play James just yet in games like this.
I think as well, one of Dan James' best qualities when he plays wide are his defensive qualities, and I don't see this game. I don't see a winger that will need to track back an awful lot in this game. I do like Dan James, and I definitely want to be against him starting. But A, I don't see there being a lot of space in behind, and B, I don't really see there being much defensive cover needed down that side.
Then again, there is the case for him. He is like a proper winger. If you get Pogba, he's going to always be cutting inside. But Dan James is sort of a winger who'll hold the width. So if you're playing against a low block, you need someone to hold the width.
And he's Welsh.
Yeah.
Well, the issue with having him to hold the width, I think, is given how defensive Burnley are likely to set up, Luke Shaw will be able to get forward and hold the width on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
If you want to play with Dan James as a quote out-and-out winger, the problem with that is going to be his job would be to put in crosses, and I as good as Edinson Cavani is heading the ball, and as much as Mason Greenwood's improving at it, I really don't think the key to us beating Burnley is crossing. James Tarkowski and Ben Mee would just swallow them up all day. They've basically got two Harry Maguires back there in terms of heading the ball out. And I really don't think crossing is going to be our best option, or at least crossing high. One option could be kind of getting down the line and then putting in a low cross. That might work, but headers I don't think, our best solution to winning this match.
We were doing that cross where we were going a bit further, but then putting it in front of the defenders because the defenders were anticipating the cross. I remember at Turf Moor and a couple of other games, and that's where Bruno and Pogba were arriving. I do think Fred and McTominay will start, and Pogba will probably play off the left because I feel like that's clicked almost, especially while Rashford. Ollie has such a good opportunity now to rest Rashford. Like, you won't get a better opportunity to give Rashford 10, 11, 12 days off, and the boys are probably going to have a couple of days off work, like for the first time in ages, and probably most of them all season, apart from the ones who haven't been on international duty. This is such a good opportunity to rest Marcus Rashford, and hope he seizes it.
It's one of only 2 times we have a free midweek to give him a prolonged rest, because obviously Ollie's not going to have him miss 2 matches. And other than the time between this fixture and Leeds, the only other time this season we're going to have a midweek off is between, I believe it's Fulham and Wolves on the last week of the season. That's literally the only other midweek we get off, and at that point, obviously, hopefully, we'll be resting players for a Europa League final.
They're on about changing that to Resurgent so that all fans can have a chance of going to the stadium. So they're on about putting Fulham in midweek, like as in all of that game week 37. They're on about putting that to midweek before game week 38. So,
wow.
Well, whatever ends up happening, the big thing is this is the best chance to rest Marcus Rashford we've had all season, as everyone's pointing out. We're not going to catch Man City. I know we all want to. I know the gap's down to 8 points if we win at the weekend, but it's not going to happen. Second place is pretty much locked in for us at this point, unless we completely implode. So the league matches don't have a lot of value going forward, and Ollie would be wise to rest anyone who's having any kind of knock. You might even actually consider not playing Harry Maguire because I think this is the last week he can get a yellow card for the 2-match suspension, right? After this, it no longer applies. And the next 2 matches are Leeds and Liverpool. Obviously, we don't want to miss our captain for Liverpool. So I think there's an argument even to rest him, although I wouldn't do it. But whatever it is, I think Ollie should be deprioritizing this match as much as possible with a view to focusing on the Europa League and focusing on the rivalry matches that matter more.
I think it's a huge testament to Marcus Rashford himself and how much he sacrifices for this club. The fact that during the week he can't wear hard-soled shoes And at the weekend, he still goes on the pitch and, he gives everything. He sacrifices a hell of a lot for this club. And I think just now we're sort of, saying, he should rest Rashford, and the idea that he should start, given his fitness and the fact that he can't wear household shoes, just shows how much he does sacrifice for this club and how good he has been. I just wanted a little shout out for Rashford there.
Yeah, I mean, with all this talk about Pogba and potentially James start, and I actually think Rashford will actually start on the left wing. Do you think? Do you think he will actually start, or do you think he will be rested?
It'd be fucking stupid for him to start, but you never know, mate.
Yeah, he can't. He doesn't need to start. He doesn't need to. So I really hope not.
Sorry, Apollo, go ahead.
I'm hoping the fact that Ollie rested him yesterday is realizing he really could do with one, and that if he had been involved yesterday, I'd have been less confident about him being rested at the weekend. But I'm starting to get a little bit hopeful that maybe Ollie's realised he needs a rest.
They were sort of being very open and honest and taking it on a game by game basis, wasn't they? Ollie and Rashford, I think the last couple of games he's played, he sort of, signalled to him after 60, 70 minutes when the pain obviously becomes too unbearable. So they're probably in contact now. And, as we were saying, this is a fantastic opportunity to rest him. And, Ollie, I'm sure Ollie, would want nothing more than a fully fit Rashford. If he's been as good as he's been while he's had knocks for the past 2 years. So if it hasn't clicked for Ollie yet, which I'm sure it has, then I'm unsure, because we've definitely got enough without him to win this weekend. I mean, Pogba's fantastic off the left, as has been showing. So it's not crucial that he starts, and if after 60, 70 minutes it's not working, you can change it up. You can sort of bring Pogba into the pivot, and you could even play Dan James if the spaces open up. So it's not crucial that Rashford starts or is even involved at all, although I do think he'll be on the bench.
And in previous pods, we've spoke about, Bruno and Rashford are Pippin and Michael Jordan. But it's good that now Cavani and Mason Greenwood are stepping up with goals and Pogba goals, assists.
Yeah,
just at the right time. So I think things are coming together, and now this is the perfect moment for Rashford to miss a Premier League game or come on maybe with 15 minutes to go.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to predictions, we'll give our predictions for Manchester United versus Burnley. So I'm going to go with 2-0 to Manchester United. So Josh, what do you think?
I think we're going to match our points from last year, going to 66 points. I think we're going to beat our wins total, and we're going to take a step towards beating our goals total from last year. So I think it's going to be 3-0 to Manchester United.
Yeah, United, Apollo, what do you think?
I think stylistically it'll be a similar sort of style to the Granada game. The hard-fought game, but just in the end we have enough to win the game. So I'll go 2-0 United again.
Dan?
I think we will concede, but I will still think we will win. I think I'm going to go 2-1.
And United versus Agent?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-1 United win. I do think we'll concede. I think we're due to concede a goal, and I think we're also due to get a penalty. So I think we're going to win off of Bruno Fernandes penalty in the second half.
Okay, so I think we'll end it there. So obviously remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, give us a follow on whatever platform you're watching on. We do also have a new podcast series coming up called The Developing Devils, which will be discussing the latest goings on with the academy. So do look forward to that. I think that's all if I'm not wrong. So we'll see you very soon.